The car pulled up to the sleek glass building, its polished exterior reflecting the overcast sky. Carolyn Leavitt sat in the back seat, staring through the tinted window, her fingers gripping the edge of her coat. She took a deep breath. It was just another interview, she had done hundreds before. But something about this one unsettled her. It was the way her publicist had phrased it, "This one's important. Be yourself, but not too much." The driver stepped out and opened the door for her. Carolyn hesitated for a moment before stepping onto the pavement. The wind carried a sharp bite, causing her to clutch her coat tighter around her body. Adjusting the strap of her bag, she took slow, measured steps toward the building entrance. Inside, the lobby was modern and minimalistic, with marble floors and walls lined with framed magazine covers. She caught glimpses of familiar faces, authors, actors, directors, people she had shared space with at events, on bestseller lists, in green rooms before talk shows. And now, it's my turn again, she thought, stepping up to the receptionist's desk. "Carolyn Leavitt," she said, her voice calm despite the anxious energy thrumming beneath her skin. The receptionist, a young woman with perfectly styled hair, smiled and nodded. "Of course, Ms. Leavitt. You're expected. Please follow me." The walk through the hallway felt both too long and too short. Her heels clicked against the floor, each step punctuating the thoughts racing through her mind. What angle would they take? Would they ask about her latest book? About her past? About... "Here we are," the receptionist said, opening a door. The room was intimate, with soft lighting and two chairs facing each other. A small table sat between them, holding 2 glasses of water and a notepad. The interviewer, a man in his 40s with a sharp suit and an even sharper gaze, stood as she entered. "Ms. Leavitt," he greeted, extending a hand. "Thank you for coming." Carolyn shook his hand. His grip was firm but not overpowering. "Of course. Thank you for having me." "Please, have a seat," he gestured to the chair opposite him. She settled in, smoothing the fabric of her skirt. The interviewer took his place across from her, flipping open the notepad. He didn't glance down at it, his eyes remained locked on her, studying. "Assessing. Before we begin," he said, "I just want you to know, this isn't a typical interview. I want to have a real conversation." Carolyn gave a small, polite smile. Real conversation? She had heard that before. It usually meant something was coming. Something unexpected. "Sounds good," she replied, her voice measured. The interviewer leaned forward slightly. "Let's start simple. How are you feeling today?" Carolyn considered the question. She could give the automatic, practiced response, "I'm great, thank you," or she could be honest. "I'm a little tired," she admitted. "It's been a long few weeks." "Understandable," he nodded. "Your new book is doing incredibly well. Congratulations." "Thank you," she said, easing into the conversation. "It's been overwhelming, but in a good way." He flipped a page in his notebook. "This book feels different from your previous work. More personal. Would you say that's true?" Carolyn hesitated, glancing down at her hands. "Yes. I think all writers put pieces of themselves into their work, but this one. It's closer to home." The interviewer's gaze sharpened. "Closer how?" She exhaled, forcing a small smile. "You've read it. I'm sure you can guess." He didn't smile back. "I'd rather hear it from you." The air in the room shifted. Carolyn adjusted her posture, sitting straighter. She could feel the weight of his stare, the way he was carefully dismantling every layer of her guarded response. She reached for the glass of water but didn't drink. "It's about loss," she said finally. "And regret. About things we can't take back." The interviewer nodded as if he had expected that answer. "Your readers have connected with it deeply. Many say they see themselves in your words. But I wonder, how much of yourself do you see in them?" A flicker of something passed over Carolyn's face. She pressed her lips together. "This is what I do," she said. "I tell stories. And sometimes, they come from a place that even I don't fully understand." The interviewer's expression didn't change. He watched her carefully, as if waiting for something more. Carolyn inhaled slowly. "It's just another interview," she reminded herself. "Just another conversation." But the way he was looking at her, the way he had framed that question, made her wonder if it really was. The silence stretched between them, thick and heavy. Carolyn shifted slightly in her seat, her fingers grazing the cool surface of the water glass. The interviewer hadn't looked away, hadn't eased his sharp gaze. She had been in many interviews before. She had answered difficult questions, dodged prying ones, and smiled through the ones that made her uncomfortable. But something about this moment felt different. And then, he asked it. "Do you ever regret it?" Carolyn blinked, her fingers tightening around the glass. A cold knot formed in her stomach. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice quieter than she intended. The interviewer leaned forward slightly. His voice was calm, even. "Do you ever regret what happened?" Her heartbeat quickened. She swallowed, forcing herself to keep her expression neutral. "I'm not sure what you mean." He didn't back down. "You wrote about it, in a way. In your book. The sense of loss, of something slipping through your fingers before you even realized it was gone." Carolyn felt her breathing grow shallow. She had expected questions about her work, about the creative process, about the meaning behind her words. But this was too direct. Too personal. "I write fiction," she said, her voice steady despite the storm building inside her. "Do you?" he countered. "Or do you just change the names?" The words landed like a punch to the chest. Carolyn's grip on the glass faltered, and she set it down quickly before it could slip from her grasp. A lump formed in her throat, thick and suffocating. She glanced away, focusing on the small notepad in front of the interviewer. She should have expected this. The book had stirred questions, had brought old wounds back into the light. And yet, she hadn't been ready for this. The interviewer didn't press further. He simply waited. The silence between them stretched, each second heavier than the last. Carolyn's lips parted slightly, as if she wanted to say something, but no words came. And then, without warning, her vision blurred. The first tear slipped down her cheek before she could stop it. She blinked rapidly, inhaling sharply, trying to compose herself. Not here. Not now. But it was too late. She pressed a hand to her temple, as if that could somehow hold back the emotions crashing over her. Another tear fell. Then another. She wasn't sobbing. There was no dramatic gasp for breath, no shaking shoulders. But the quiet, restrained nature of it only made it feel more raw. More real. The interviewer's expression softened, just slightly. "Carolyn," he said gently, "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to." She shook her head, holding up a hand. "No, it's fine. I just—" Her voice wavered. "I didn't expect that." He nodded, watching her carefully. "Do you want to take a break?" For a moment, she considered it. She could step outside, regain control of herself, return with a perfectly composed face and a calm demeanor. But something inside her rebelled against that idea. "No," she said, clearing her throat. "Let's keep going." The interviewer hesitated, as if weighing whether to push forward or let her decide the pace. Finally, he nodded. "All right," he said. "But I want you to know, you don't have to answer anything you don't want to." Carolyn let out a small, breathy laugh, though it held no humor. "That's not how this works, is it?" He tilted his head slightly, considering. "Maybe not. But I don't want to be cruel." She studied him, searching his face for any insincerity. She found none. She took a slow, shaky breath, wiping the corner of her eye with her fingertips. Ask your next question. But they both knew, nothing else he asked could possibly compare to the one that had already broken her. The interviewer hesitated for a moment, watching Carolyn carefully. His voice softened as he leaned slightly forward, his expression shifting from sharp curiosity to something resembling concern. "Carolyn, are you sure you're okay? We can pause for a bit if you need a moment." She forced a small, tired smile, blinking away the lingering dampness in her eyes. "I'm fine," she said, her voice steady but quiet. "Really? Let's just continue." The interviewer studied her face as if trying to determine whether she was being honest or just trying to push through the moment. Carolyn straightened her posture, exhaling slowly as she reached for the glass of water again, this time taking a small sip before setting it back down. The moment was still hanging between them, heavy, unspoken, but she was determined to move past it. "All right," the interviewer finally said, flipping a page in his notebook. "Let's talk about something else. Your writing process, has it changed over the years?" Carolyn exhaled in relief, grateful for the shift. "Yes," she said, latching on to the new topic. "I think in the beginning, I wrote with this sort of frantic energy, as if I had to prove something. I'd write late into the night, barely stopping to eat, obsessed with getting the words down. But now, I think I've learned to be more patient with myself, to understand that sometimes the best writing comes from stepping away and letting things settle." The interviewer nodded, making a small note. "That makes sense. Do you ever miss that frantic energy, though? The urgency?" Carolyn considered this for a moment, her fingers lightly tracing the rim of the glass. "Sometimes. But I think that urgency came from a place of fear. Fear that if I stopped, I'd lose everything. Now, I trust myself more." The interviewer seemed to absorb this answer before moving on. "Your latest book has been described as your most personal work yet. Some critics have even called it a form of confession. How do you feel about that?" Carolyn tensed slightly but kept her expression neutral. "I think all writing is, in some way, a confession. Even if it's fiction, even if the characters are completely different from the writer, there's always something personal buried in there." "And in this book, what's buried?" The question was sharp but not unkind. Carolyn hesitated, then exhaled slowly. "Grief," she admitted. "And love. And regret." The interviewer nodded. "You've spoken about loss before, but this book feels different. More direct. Was there a particular moment that made you want to write it?" Carolyn shifted in her seat. "I think it was a combination of things. A lot of emotions that had been building for a long time, and I just needed a place to put them." The interviewer tapped his pen against the notepad thoughtfully. "Do you feel lighter now? After writing it?" Carolyn let out a quiet laugh, shaking her head. "No. Not really. I think some things stay with you, no matter how much you write about them." There was a pause, the air between them thick with unspoken understanding. Then, the interviewer flipped another page and continued. "Let's talk about the themes in your book. The idea of things left unsaid plays a huge role. Why do you think we struggle so much with saying what we mean?" Carolyn tilted her head slightly, considering. "Because words make things real. As long as something stays in your head, you can pretend it's not as bad as it is. But once you say it out loud, there's no taking it back. Is there something you wish you had said to someone?" The question was gentle but direct. Carolyn inhaled sharply but kept her face composed. "Many things," she admitted. "But that's life, isn't it? You don't realize the importance of a moment until it's already gone." The interviewer nodded, as if he understood exactly what she meant. "Your characters often struggle with that too. Do you see yourself in them?" Carolyn smiled slightly. "I see pieces of myself in all of them. But I also see pieces of people I've known, things I've observed. Writing is like collecting fragments of the world around you and piecing them together." "And what about the ending of your book, the interviewer pressed. It's left open, unresolved. Some readers found that frustrating. Carolyn shrugged. Life is unresolved. I don't like neat endings that tie everything up in a perfect bow, because that's not how things work. People don't always get closure. And sometimes, the most honest thing you can do is to leave a question unanswered. The interviewer tapped his pen against the notepad again. Do you think you'll ever revisit these characters? Give them a different ending. Carolyn thought about this, then shook her head. I don't think so. Their story is what it is. Changing it would feel like lying. The interviewer seemed to respect that answer. He closed his notepad for a moment, watching her. You've been writing for a long time. Has it gotten easier? Carolyn smiled, but there was something tired in her expression. No. If anything, it's gotten harder. Because now I know what's at stake. And what is at stake? The silence stretched again. Carolyn looked down at her hands, then back up at him. Everything, she said quietly. The interviewer didn't respond right away. He just nodded, as if he understood exactly what she meant. The conversation shifted again, moving through different topics, her inspirations, her process, the moments that shaped her as a writer. But there was still something lingering in the air, something unspoken between them. And Carolyn knew, deep down, that the hardest part of the interview was still ahead. The air in the room had shifted. Carolyn could feel it pressing against her chest, thick and heavy, like an approaching storm. She glanced at the clock on the wall, barely registering the time. It didn't matter. She had been here long enough. The interview had stretched past what she had anticipated, and though she had held her composure through every probing question, she could feel the weight of it now, settling deep in her bones. She shifted slightly in her seat, fingers brushing against the armrest as she straightened her posture. I think we've covered a lot, she said, keeping her voice even. I should probably wrap this up. The interviewer didn't close his notebook. Instead, he tapped his pen against the page, watching her. I have just a couple more questions, he said, his tone polite but firm. Carolyn exhaled slowly, glancing toward the door. I really need to get going, she repeated, not wanting to sound rude but also not willing to sit through another round of carefully worded interrogations. I understand, the interviewer said, nodding. But I promise these last few questions won't take long. She felt a flicker of irritation rise in her chest. How many times had she heard that before? Just one more question. It was never just one more. It was always a slow unraveling, a game of pulling at loose threads until there was nothing left to hold on to. I appreciate that, she said, forcing a small smile, but I really do have to go. The interviewer leaned slightly forward, his eyes still locked onto hers. Carolyn, he said carefully, this is one of the most honest interviews you've given. I don't want to cut it short when we're right on the edge of something real. Her jaw tightened. We've been real, she said. More real than most interviews I've done. But I don't owe you anything more than I've already given. The interviewer's gaze didn't waver. You don't owe me anything, he agreed. But do you owe it to yourself? A sharp breath caught in her throat. She hadn't expected that. He wasn't just trying to keep her there for the sake of a story, he was pushing her toward something she wasn't sure she wanted to face. That's not fair, she said, her voice lower now. This isn't therapy. This is an interview. And I've given you enough. But have you? The words were calm, not accusatory, but they felt like a challenge nonetheless. Carolyn's fingers curled into the fabric of her skirt. She could feel the heat creeping up her neck, the frustration bubbling beneath her skin. I don't like being cornered, she said, her voice sharper now. I don't like being made to feel like I have to bleed for an audience just to make a conversation meaningful. That's not what I'm doing, the interviewer said, but there was no apology in his tone. I think you want to say something. I think you came here knowing that. She let out a dry, humorless laugh. You think you know me? I think I know what it looks like when someone is holding back, he said simply. And I think it's exhausting you. Carolyn felt her pulse quicken. She had been careful. Careful not to let too much slip, careful to keep the walls intact, careful to maintain control. But now, sitting in this too small room with this too intense man, she felt it unraveling. This is exactly why I need to go, she said, standing now, smoothing down her skirt with shaky hands. Thank you for your time. The interviewer didn't move. He didn't try to stop her, but he also didn't make it easy. You're going to leave, he said. And the second you step out that door, you're going to wish you had stayed for just one more question. She hesitated for the briefest of moments, her fingers hovering over the back of the chair. Then she shook her head, forcing herself to turn toward the door. Goodbye, she said, and she walked away before he could say anything else. Carolyn reached for the door handle, her fingers wrapping around the cool metal as she pulled it open. The air outside the small interview room felt different, lighter, freer, yet something inside her chest remained tight, coiled with the tension of everything that had just happened. She had expected the interviewer to let her go without another word, to accept that she had made her decision and that the conversation was over. But as she stepped forward, his voice stopped her. Wait. She froze, her shoulders stiff, but she didn't turn around. She didn't want another question, another attempt to pull her back into a conversation that had already drained her. But something in his tone was different now, no longer pressing, no longer pushing. It was softer. Resigned. I'm sorry. She finally turned, just slightly, glancing over her shoulder. The interviewer had put his pen down, his notebook closed. There was no more analysis in his gaze, no more quiet calculation. He just looked at her, a flicker of regret crossing his face. I shouldn't have kept pushing, he admitted. I could see you were done, and I ignored it. That wasn't fair to you. Carolyn inhaled slowly, studying him, trying to decide how she felt about the apology. She had done so many interviews over the years, had dealt with so many people who thought they were entitled to her emotions, her pain, her stories. Rarely did anyone ever acknowledge when they had crossed a line. She shifted slightly, fingers still gripping the doorframe. You were just doing your job, she said finally, her voice measured. I get it. That's not an excuse, he said. Just because I was looking for something real doesn't mean I had the right to force it out of you. A small silence stretched between them. Carolyn considered her next words carefully. You weren't wrong, she said at last. There was something I didn't say. But that doesn't mean I was ready to say it. The interviewer nodded, his expression understanding now. I won't pretend to know what that was, he said. But I do know that sometimes the most important things take time. She gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. For the first time since she had walked into the room, she felt a little less like she was fighting to hold herself together. She turned back toward the door, stepping out into the hallway. This time, the interviewer didn't stop her. Carolyn. She paused but didn't turn around. If you ever want to finish the conversation, on your terms, he said, I'll be here. She didn't answer right away. Then, with a quiet exhale, she said, maybe one day. And with that, she walked away.